Good evening. This is Dr. Thomas Klein. I'm coming to you from Raleigh, North Carolina. And my special interest, now that I'm not practicing medicine, which I did for 45 years, and I'm pretty much a full-time researcher and advisor to the National Pain Council and researcher for my own group, JATH, J-A-T-H, Educational Consortium. The Educational Consortium is sort of the research arm of the National Pain Council, where I'm, as I mentioned, an advisor. We're going to start Monday's videos. This is one of the Monday videos, so that each Monday we're going to have a Dr. Klein video about various topics, but usually about people in pain with long-term painful disease because they've been cut off by the government. So today we want to talk about a charge that is levied against doctors and leads to sometimes imprisonment. It's called overprescribing. Now, it sort of makes sense that if you're giving too much, maybe that's causing a problem. But we need to analyze that. Overprescribing is not a word we doctors use. You can give too much to somebody, a toxic amount, but what is overprescribing? Well, it's a term invented by the Department of Justice in order to prosecute doctors. And this is based on our CDC Director, Thomas Frieden, when he said on March 15, 2016, with the introduction of the CDC guidelines, that the opioid epidemic was due to doctors overprescribing. Now, we are going to ask him to explain this because if you're a lawyer over at the Department of Justice, this kind of sounds like marching orders. If doctors are causing the problem by overprescribing, arrest doctors who are overprescribing. The problem is there's no federal law about overprescribing. And so the Department of Justice is kind of making up the law as they go. What overprescribing means to the Department of Justice and the prosecutors and the DEA, if you prescribe too many opiate pills, you're going to increase addiction. And there are even articles written that say more pills cause more addiction. Makes sense? But it's not true. We have researched this very carefully and thoroughly, and as you know, the National Pain Council is not a political organization. We are an organization that produces facts for people to make policies and decisions. So what's going on? So there's the Department of Justice goes after doctors who are prescribing a lot. That means doctors with a lot of patients. See, they add up the total amount. So there's one fellow up in Wisconsin. He had the largest pain practice in the state. Somebody has to have the largest one. Even if you have one patient, you might be the largest one. The Federal Drug Police, or the DEA, which means Drug Enforcement Agency, showed up with 16 agents and raided his practice. They made he and his wife stay in the office while they went searching, which is standard procedure for criminal investigations. So they took a lot of his files. They took personal things that belonged to him that they thought might be helpful. And after all day long, they left with the files. No charges were levied. But the DEA asked him to forfeit his license. Now, why do they do that? Because the DEA really believes that overprescribing, and in his case, lots of patients, would cause more problems because the director of the CDC, Thomas Frieden, said so. He said overprescribing caused the opioid epidemic, and nobody challenged that. Certainly not a bunch of lawyers. I mean, they're going to believe what a federal agency person has to say. This is Washington, D.C., if you're the head of a federal agency, that's like being a general. But they've got it wrong. The law says you can be convicted of drug trafficking if you dispense or give away or sell controlled substances like opiates and outside of your authorization. That was put in the law by the legislators to protect doctors. Now they're turning it around and saying, oh, this doctor prescribed too many medicines, therefore it could cause people to distribute their prescriptions. Oh, wait a minute. That's called law by suspicion. We have a Fourth Amendment to our Constitution that says you really got to prove yourself. You can't just go around arresting people. You have to have some evidence. Was there evidence in the case of this doctor up in Wisconsin? Nope. No evidence of anything. But you know what? The DEA came and took his license, which they can do without an explanation, without a court order. They can just come and close you down. We've kind of talked about this in other videos, but this is the regulatory function of the DEA. It actually reaches the point of being in court trials where the defendant doctor who's been arrested, they'll bring up this overprescribing. Oh, if it's not too many patients, then it's too many pills per patient, that there's too much of a dose per patient. So this is a practice that's got really severely painful patients, and so you're going to prescribe more, and so now that becomes a federal crime. So you see, the federal government is interfering with the doctor-patient relationship. They are out of their league. They're playing the doctor. So in my case, I had 34 pain refugees that 10 doctors refused to treat, and so they all were on, well, they weren't all, but half of them were on high doses, half on low doses, and one was on a very low dose. But that scared the North Carolina board. You see, because they believe, along with the feds and along with Dr. Frieden, that overprescribing causes more problems. So when you hear that a doctor has been charged with overprescribing, you know right away that's a false charge. If you hear the doctor was caught selling drugs out of his car behind a Walmart, that's the real crime. You have to sell drugs to people who are not your patients. And that was reinforced by the Supreme Court recently in the Ruan decision, R-U-A-N, a doctor who was charged with overprescribing. And the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't do that. You have to follow the rules of regular criminal procedure. One, you have to know that you are doing it. And two, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. So the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the Department of Justice was screwing up and was arresting doctors. Did they do it to be mean? No. They did it because they thought they were helping out, thanks to Dr. Thomas Frieden. So I will see you next Monday, and good evening.